All right. Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I am your lead host, Sean Engel. You can find me on Twitter at SeanE247. That's right, or X if you prefer to call it that. And with me today, I have DFS Marlin, Mark Hogan, back with us once again in order to go forth and preview the weekend with the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Happy to be back on, Sean. Appreciate you having me back on, and looking forward to another exciting NASCAR weekend here with some road course racing.
Yes, we got left and right turns. We got some very interesting NASCAR action on tap for this weekend. It's the second race of the 2024 playoffs here for the Cup Series. And for the Xfinity Series, there's going to be a race as well. But before we get into all of that, let's go forth and talk a little bit about the website that helps get this show up and running, fantasyguru.com. You can get any one of their various packages in order to give you all the DFS and betting sports coverage that you need in order to win big, win greater, and just make some big fat cash. You can get the Game Time MVP all-in package for just $39.99 right now. You're going to want to get that pretty soon because, well, NBA season is going to be on tap. So all the sports you see on screen right now, that's what's covered within that plan. You get betting and DFS for NBA, NCAA basketball, NHL, PGA, MMA, soccer, racing. The total works. Basically, everything except the football and the baseball, which really, I mean, that is a great deal right there. And you get that now, you're covered for a whole 12 months. So what you waiting for? You can go forth and get that at fantasyguru.com. Now, other than that, we also have the MVP Platinum and all-in packages if you're also interested in any of the NFL content or any of the MLB content in order to be covered for a whole year. You can find prices for that at fantasyguru.com. And you can also contact support at fantasyguru.com in order to ask about the best possible deal that you can get on any of our sports packages. So go over to fantasyguru.com, get any of the packages, email support at fantasyguru.com, and you can be covered for all the sports, get lots of money, and then some. Sound good? Sound good. All right. Now, getting back into NASCAR here, well, before we get into the action for this week's race with Watkins Glen, we had a pair of races this past weekend over at the Atlanta Motor Speedway there. So let's react on to it there. Let's start off with the Xfinity Series. So in the Xfinity race, Mark, Austin Hill, he prevailed as he holds off the field to sweep Atlanta because he won there earlier in the year, and he gets his third win of the 2024 season there, Mark. First reactions to Austin Hill winning in the Xfinity Series.
Well, we were just talking about it before the show, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that we had high expectations for, that was one of the clear favorites. So certainly no surprise in seeing him finish here. I think obviously the big controversy was, between him and Corey Heim on the last lap. But ultimately, in my opinion, that's just racing. Both guys are trying to go for the win here. So, no surprises, and that was the first guy that was in the write-up for the Xfinity Series this past weekend. So Atlanta's weird, man. It's like there's a lot of things that came to fruition, but at the end of the day, a couple wrecks can still, ruin your day as well.
Yeah, that is very true. We've had that really big wreck over there where it took on lap 145, it took out a lot of good drivers. Justin Allgaier, Cole Custer, Taylor Gray, Ryan Sieg, Riley Herbst, and Jesse Love were all involved. The only only two of those drivers ended up making it out of that race. Riley Herbst, but he finished multiple laps down. And then Jesse Love, he came back in order to finish in the 6th position. So great recovery there for the other Richard Childress Racing driver. Now, as for the rest of the top 5, we had Parker Kligerman in the runner-up spot. He matches his best career Xfinity finish. AJ Allmendinger in 3rd, Chandler Smith in 4th, and then the aforementioned Corey Heim in the 5th position there, Mark.
Yeah, No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the whole race got shook up after that accident. So, anything goes at that point once you have that many drivers get knocked out, especially towards the top.
Yeah, that is for sure, for certain. I know we both had a lot of action on Allgaier, Custer, and Ryan Sieg in particular. Sieg, let's just talk about Ryan Sieg there for a second, because at one point we saw that he was about 2 laps down, and then we were talking about this in the Discord this past weekend. I was saying, well, 2 laps down. He was the only driver 2 laps down at the time. There is a chance he could come back. And, well, he made his way back onto the lead lap and was charging right inside the top 10 until that wreck happened, though. But it just goes to show, Mark, even when you think your drivers are down and out, depending on the circumstances on the track, and Atlanta is a good example of this, we can still see a driver be able to come back and still pay off even when you think all the chips are down.
Yeah, it was me. I think there was a couple other people in the Discord, and I was honestly tilting a little bit because I was like, man, beginning of the race, he is already 2 laps down after, what happened in the car at the beginning. And it was like a silly mistake that could have easily been avoided. It was basically like a plug was like not plugged in all the way or something weird along those lines. And so, but yeah, I mean, you made an excellent point at the time where it was like, hey, we're down, but we're not out for anyone that rostered Sieg, just because he is the only one. And so 2 laps down in Atlanta, where you are going to get more cautions, like that is inevitable on this track. The second he got back on the lead lap, he flew all the way up to the top because his car was looking fast for that race.
Oh, for certain. And it was just quite astounding to see. It's always fun to see drivers charge from the back to the front like that. And then Sieg, knowing that his playoff position was in jeopardy if he didn't have a good day. I mean, well, unfortunately, the wreck ruined that. But for a little while there, it looked like he was actually making some headway and really giving Sammy Smith a battle for that playoff cutoff.
Yeah, I mean, man, I had Taylor Gray and Ryan Sieg in the same lineup, so it was such a bummer to see that, and then Riley Herbst as well. So, I had rounded it out with Truex, Love, Honeyman in one. I had Blaine Perkins in another, who went from 24th to 19th. He was like 1% owned, so I mean, he was $5,700 there. Those guys don't wreck. That it would have been a Yahtzee type of day.
It certainly would have, but that's just racing, I guess you can say, as they usually say in the NASCAR circles. That's just racing. So,
that's right.
Going back into the discussion for the race here with the finish, let's talk about Corey Heim for a second there. He tried to make a move for the win against Austin Hill by taking the top, but before Hill just pushed Heim up into the wall. Now, Chandler Smith, who was also trying to overtake Austin Hill there towards the very end, he was pretty angry with Corey Heim after the race for just going for it instead of pushing Chandler Smith past Austin Hill. What are your thoughts on this move, and especially the fact that Corey Heim, he decided to go for the win instead of just pushing somebody from the same manufacturer? So did Corey Heim do the right thing in your eyes? What do you think, Mark?
I mean, I don't know. This might be controversial, I guess, but I think so. He's trying to win the race. It's the final lap. The same manufacturer, like it's not, I don't know, like that to me, that doesn't do it for him. He's trying to win. So, Austin Hill was the faster car. He's trying to get around him. He's, I have no problem, honestly, with it. He's looking for a victory. Yeah, he's being selfish on the racetrack, but you're supposed to be. This is professional racing. So I think at the end of the day, it is what it is. And that's just, like you said, that's just racing.
Yeah, and it just goes forth. There's kind of a bit of a whole wider discussion that's been going on in NASCAR circles about teammates, like manufacturer teammates on these super speedway and drafting tracks. And we saw another case of it here, because you have to also think back towards Daytona a few weeks ago when Harrison Burton won the race after he was pushed by Parker Retzlaff. They're two different manufacturers compared, and Parker Retzlaff, he received some flack at the time just because, well, his team, Beard Motorsports, in that one lone cup start there, they were affiliated with Richard Childress Racing, and RCR was trying to win with Kyle Busch in that particular race. RCR and Chevrolet were not exactly thrilled with Retzloff pushing a Ford driver instead of what's a quote-unquote Chevy teammate towards a victory here. And then here we see another case of this where we have two Toyota drivers this time. One of them not exactly being thrilled while the other's going for it.
It's politics though, man. These people forget these guys are maniacs. They're getting in these cars, driving 200 miles per hour. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like if I'm not a driver, but if I'm driving one of these race cars, like, I'm just looking at how I can win and what these guys are telling me in the radio in the moment. I'm not thinking about all of these other things going on or who's manufacturer. Like, I am just trying to win, especially if I'm up towards the top.
Yeah, and we even going back towards Parker Retzloff at Daytona, he was saying he wanted to put himself in the best position in order to win the race for his sponsor and just so he can get a win under his belt. Corey Heim, basically, they were interviewing him after the race. He was saying pretty much among the same things there, too. And I don't blame Corey Heim for putting the move that he pulled there in order to try to win, because you know what? At the end of the day, even if they're Toyota teammates, they're not exactly a part of the same exact Toyota team now, too. Because Chandler Smith, he's with Joe Gibbs Racing, and Corey Heim, he was racing for Sam Hunt Racing. So it's not exactly the same team, which is a totally different case from what we saw on Sunday there, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Maybe the manufacturers are just getting a little, they're looking over their shoulders. Potentially other manufacturers are looking to get in the game here. So, there might be a couple whispers in a few of these teams' ears and to try and really team up. And I don't know if that will have a long-term impact in future races to come, but I think some of these manufacturers are looking over their shoulders for sure.
Yeah, especially with rumors about more manufacturers popping up maybe within the next 2 to 5 years or so. So that's
if you think that happens, who do you think gets in the game?
Right now, I think the leading candidate in order to join into NASCAR, if you were to ask me right now, is Honda.
Okay. Why is that?
If only just because we know there's been some talks about Honda in particular maybe wanting to switch their focus away from IndyCar into other ventures. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of rumors and discussion about Andretti Motorsport, one of the top IndyCar teams, having a bigger investment into NASCAR. And one of the primary sponsors for Andretti Motorsport at IndyCar is Gainbridge. And who does Gainbridge sponsor? Spire Motorsports.
There you go. There's a pathway there.
Exactly. And let's not even forget, too, Marco Andretti's made a few starts with the team in the Truck Series. So another point towards that.
It's reading the tea leaves here. So that's a good call.
Oh, for certain. Now let's continue going through the Xfinity race here. Top place differential plays of the week. Kyle Weatherman was who made DFS owners happiest on Saturday right there, Mark. He started 37th, finished in the 11th position, gaining 26 positions. We had Leland Honeyman gaining 18 from starting 35th, going all the way to 17th. And then Corey Heim, as mentioned, he started 21st. He finished 5th. Really good day for the young driver there.
Yeah, Corey Heim had a couple down races, so it's good to see him. It was good to see him back on the upswing. And we were on Honeyman, had him up in the article, and then Weatherman there was some ownership on him too. So I'll take the accountability for that. I didn't write him up. But at the end of the day, Weatherman and Honeyman, in my opinion, they get the place differential because of the wrecks in front of them. So they still had good races. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to discount that, but we're probably seeing these guys finish in the 20s versus the teens if it wasn't for all, some of these pileups.
And the wrecks certainly did play a part into the worst place differential plays of the week. In fact, actually, the top two with worst were Cole Custer and Taylor Gray. Custer started third. He finished 31st. Gray started second. He finished 28th. And then the third on that list for worst place differential for this week in Xfinity was Sam Mayer, who was all involved in a much earlier wreck compared to those two. He started 11th, finished 36th, losing 25 positions there.
I thought he looked pretty fast too before that happened. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah, very unfortunate indeed. Stage winners, Justin Allgaier won the first stage. AJ Allmendinger won the second. Allmendinger also led the most laps of the race at 40, followed by Chandler Smith, Cole Custer, Jesse Love, Justin Allgaier, Taylor Gray, Austin Hill, Sheldon Creed, and Leland Honeyman. So those were all the lap leaders. Any other drivers that we should cover before we move on to Cup here, Mark?
I think I'm good. I think we talked about all the point. Jesse Love was interesting, but and was heavy on him. Outside of that, though, I was expecting a little bit more from Ryan Truex, but I think we covered most of the guys that were that I wanted to talk through.
Yeah, Ryan Truex, he still ended up finishing inside the top 10, so he didn't have a horrible day. We just expected a little more out of him. Shout out to Josh Williams finishing in the 8th position there for Kaulig Racing. So we've seen him sneak into the top 10 a few times this year. He snuck in for another one there. And also do want to give a hat tip towards Lawless Allen, who was driving in that AM Racing number 15 car, which we know they've been very, very shaky with their results this year. He ends up getting a 13th place result out of the whole thing there, Mark. That was a little surprising to me.
I don't think he started off well in the race too. I feel like he was hanging in the back for quite some time. So probably I feel like you said, a shaky car, but another beneficiary of a lot of cars wiping out in front of him, I would imagine. So
that's very true. Very, very true. But, getting into different sorts of circumstances, let's get into the Cup Series race here and recap that here. So with the finish, it went into overtime. Joey Logano, he ended up being the winner. He gets his second Cup win of the season, his second career Cup Series win at Atlanta. The number 22 ended up winning. He gets to move on to the second round of the playoffs, the round of 12. He beat out Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, and Alex Bowman for the victory, Mark.
Yeah, I thought Suarez was going to take it again there. That was a very competitive end of the race. That was an interesting what was that, like signage on the track at one point that led to a late caution. So that was kind of an interesting element to it that I think definitely had an impact on the end results.
Yeah, the Walmart sign.
Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious, how does that happen? So that was interesting. And I mean, Daniel, look, this is another, like we were talking about in the Xfinity race, like Daniel Suarez. We talked him up the whole time last week, expected him to make some nice moves here. So a guy like him, I mean, Eric Jones was up there for quite some time. And then, unfortunately, it didn't work out as good for him as Suarez, but another guy that's been racing well was in the mix. So I think there was a lot of elements to this race where we saw guys do exactly what we thought they were going to do, but still hard to predict when anyone can wreck at any given moment. So
that's very true. But we've talked about Suarez. We also talked about his teammate Ross Chastain. You posed that question to me last week on this very show. What would Ross Chastain do if Daniel Suarez was in a situation to win, knowing that he was his teammate? We saw that on full display right there. We talked about that on this very show. We called it that Suarez and Chastain would be competitive right at the end. It would come down to being a teammate steal. Suarez, I'm sure that his car was probably about as good as Logano's there, but the difference was that Chastain just couldn't keep up and couldn't keep pushing them. Blaney with Logano, that was the difference because Blaney was able to stay with Logano, give Logano that extra push in order to keep him ahead. Man.
And Blaney was like how he kept his car together and kept it at the front like that. I mean, that was pretty mind-blowing in and of itself. I mean, he's driving around a box held together with tape, basically. So
Yeah, and it was looking like one of the fastest things on the entire track there. It was surging through the field.
A fascinating race. It really was.
It really was. And you know what else was fascinating was that playoff drivers occupied 9 of the top 10 positions. We mentioned the top 5 just before, but we also have Tyler Reddick in the 6th position, Chase Elliott in 8th, William Byron in 9th, and then Austin Cindric ended up finishing in the 10th position. The only one driver that wasn't a playoff contender that was in the top 10 was Kyle Busch in the 7th position there, Mark.
Yeah, Austin Cindric was okay. So Kyle Busch, he's racing well despite not being a playoff contender. I think he's back, and I still think people are off of him. Austin Cindric, I feel like was a top 5 car as far as speed goes. His car looked fast, so that was actually a little disappointing to not see him only finish 10th. I don't know if I'm going Cindric this week, but we have to keep note of him for maybe some future races. And then obviously Kyle Larson. I mean, he has been dominant, and he has not finished a lot of races this year. So, what happens with Kyle Larson moving forward? Could he have a nice? I mean, he's one of the favorites, for this race here. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's not a bad DFS play, right? Kyle Larson, bounce back week. A lot of people got burned by him from last week, so they don't want to go back to the well. I think it's a good spot.
Well, you bring up the situations in the context of this week there, but this week, compared to the last race, there are 2 totally different types of racetracks entirely. But where I do think we should keep this in mind is that where we have Talladega in a few weeks within that next round of the playoffs. And if you're taking notes, this is what you should take the notes for, because Talladega is also another super speedway and drafting track that keep in mind, and that's in the middle of that wild card round in the playoffs. So that's going to be very big in order to keep a note there too. And if Austin Cindric makes it past this round, well, you can sure bet that him and his team are going to have that race circled in order to try to do well. Now, as for most of the other playoff contenders, they got involved with some trouble. Now, 3 of them ended up wrecking. Harrison Burton ended up wrecking. And then Kyle Larson and Chase Briscoe both got involved in an early wreck before the end of the first stage there. They both finished at the back. Martin Truex Jr., he had suspension issues, finishing in 35th position. And then while Denny Hamlin ended up collecting damage in a later wreck, he still ended up finishing the race running 24th, while Ty Gibbs, for a little while there, it looked like he was in the best position of all to win this race. He ended up falling back into the 17th position there, Mark.
Yeah, Ty Gibbs was fast. So both of these guys feeling the pressure now. Denny Hamlin's interesting. I feel like, doesn't he? I feel like sometimes he even takes the strategy of hanging around towards the back and then try to move up, in the later stages of the race. So, but I mean, yeah, at the end of the day for him, I feel like someone caught, like, was it Hamlin who caught like a fuel line fire or something like that? Maybe I'm mixing that up with another race, but I could have sworn someone. I could be wrong on that. So
I don't think there were any fires this weekend in particular that we were
okay.
really looking for.
I
But
thought someone had a pit stall issue, and then another car. I feel like it was a Hamlin or someone drove over it, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of a different race.
that might be. Let's get into the top place differential plays of the week there. Now, we talked a lot about the first driver that topped this list already. That was Daniel Suarez. He started in the 30th position, ended up finishing second. He was definitely one of the top drivers I wrote in the write-up for this past weekend, so kudos right there. Christopher Bell, he gained 22 positions, starting from the 26th position, finishing in 4th. And then we had 2 drivers each that gained 17 positions there, which was number 3 on the list. Tyler Reddick, who started in the 23rd position, he finished 6th. And then Justin Haley, he started in the 29th position. He finished 12th. We were talking up Haley a lot on this show this past weekend, and he was also in the write-up as well. So if you were sticking with us on Fantasy Guru, we were told you we were really in on Haley for a while, and he paid off this week.
Yeah, Haley, Haley's been like the Fantasy Guru darling, I feel like, this season. So and he had a couple down weeks, so that was definitely the spot to go after Haley on, and he returned. So, if you didn't take advantage, you already missed the train.
Choo-choo, the train ended up going right there and getting us some cash this past weekend. But as for the worst place differential plays of the week, we had Kyle Larson. He lost 31 positions due to that crash, starting 6th, finished 37th. Chase Briscoe in that same wreck, he lost 28 positions there, started 10th, finished 38th, and then losing 24 positions, which is third worst on the list. 2 drivers, Todd Gilliland, who started 3rd and finished 27th, and then Josh Berry, who started 4th and finished 28th there, Mark.
Yeah, I'm gonna be looking at Kyle Larson. I don't know if I'm necessarily dead set on him at this point. I think qualifying matters a lot this week, but I would say in general. So, and I was talking with Rich about this at the Fantasy Football Expo about a month ago. What I have noticed is that the best NASCAR builds is an opposite approach of how we approach NFL contests from a fantasy guru philosophical standpoint. Philosophical standpoint? Was that a word? Philosophy
standpoint.
Whatever I'm saying. Basically, at the end of the day, our approach from a DFS football standpoint is, you ride the cheap chalk and you get different at the top. I think NASCAR is the inverse, where you ride the expensive chalk and you get different at the bottom. So find differentiators at the lower price points and then ride the chalk towards the top. I really think that's the best guidelines to run by when it comes to NASCAR DFS. And if you were to compare it to NFL, for anyone that's looking to get started with this or looking to maybe get an edge and take that next step, elevate their DFS game.
Well, I think that is an approach that does end up paying off most weeks, but there are some weeks where some of those mid-tier drivers end up really being the chalk that ends up paying off too. You got to kind of take it almost race by race overall from what I've noted in my experiences with DFS.
Yeah, so take that, and then there's your one-offs, like Daniel Suarez last week, and then it's like Daniel Suarez might be again that one-off this week. So you have to look at race history and see how these drivers are doing in comparison to their track records.
Yeah, not to mention notice where they were qualifying. We mentioned the 3 drivers with the best place differential in Cup: Daniel Suarez, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, and Justin Haley. All 4, actually, there's 4 drivers here. All 4 of these drivers, not one of them was really a top price play this week there, Mark.
No, they weren't. They were not. Now the ownership levels, like the ownership though, is really, I think, and this is the biggest question sometimes we get in the Discord too. So I'm going to really try to hone in on ownership a little bit more, so we can relay that to the Discord accurately, or more accurately. So I think we do a pretty good job of targeting ownership, but I think it's an area, in my opinion, personally, that I can improve upon.
Hey, you know what? You're just assessing yourself like these drivers and teams do. You look at the strengths, see where you can improve, and then go forth and let the results show for it. So I'm sure the results are going to show for it.
Hey, if I'm not winning $100,000 a week, then there's something I can improve upon. So,
oh, that's great. That is great.
And if I am, then I will be a happy camper. So, and I will relax at that point.
That's the priorities that we all should strive to live by. All right, getting into the rest of the Cup race here, we had stage winners. Well, Ryan Blaney won the first stage, Austin Cindric won the second stage, and with Joey Logano winning the race, you can technically say that Team Penske has swept this race as far as how each of the stages ended this week, Mark.
Yeah. I mean, like we were saying, I think Cindric was a very fast car. Blaney, that was fascinating to see him do that. And then Logano just kind of hung around the whole time and then stole the show at the very end. So very impressive
Signature
across
Logano.
the board.
Signature Logano.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fun to see a bunch of guys flame out there at the end, too, with I think Denny Hamlin was in that. So a lot of guys that kind of wrecked on that final lap.
True. So Getting into the lap leaders there, Cindric, he led the most laps. He led 92, followed by Ty Gibbs at 37, Ryan Blaney at 33, Michael McDowell at 30, Kyle Busch at 24, Ross Chastain at 13, Daniel Suarez at 9, as well as Joey Logano. Bubba Wallace led 8, Alex Bowman led 5, Ryan Preece and William Byron led 2, and then BJ McLeod and Carson Hocevar each led 1 lap there, Mark.
Yeah, Cindric and Gibbs are definitely the two that stick out for me. Gibbs was fast, so was Cindric. So keep an eye on those guys for these types of tracks moving forward.
True. Now, before we move on, I'm just going to shout out a few finishers here. Daniel Hemrick in 11th was very surprising that he finished races and paid off with a solid finish. He was one of the cheapest drivers this past weekend and on both sites there. Now, Ross Chastain, he fell into 13th. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had a decent day in 14th, still gained a lot of place differential, as did Corey LaJoie and Carson Hocevar there in 15th and 16th. Now, Brad Keselowski is a driver that we expected more out of, and he was just not there, Mark. He was just not there.
Yeah, I didn't look at that too much, but I agree. You would think in a race like this he'd be more in the top 10 at least. So
yeah, for sure. Any other drivers that we should spotlight here before we move on, Mark?
I just think Eric Jones, I think it's very easy to read the scorecard and say, okay, Eric Jones finished 26. He didn't do very well, but he was up there for quite some time. It was like him and Daniel Suarez both made their moves towards the top. So, just keep an eye on Eric Jones for another race that is or another track that's comparable here, because that could be a nice play in the future.
Yeah, Talladega in a few weeks. Remember that.
Yep.
Okie dokie. So now that we're through with Atlanta, we do have some small news notes that we got to hit that came out this week here. Let's get the big one out of the way. So now it's official. After a Tuesday press conference, Kyle Larson is officially doing the Memorial Day double once again in 2025. He's going to try to run the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte in the same day. Wow. Here we go again, huh, Mark?
He's the man. I love it. Keep doing it. I think it's, everyone gave him a little bit of flack, or gave NASCAR flack for kind of, accommodating for it. But at the end of the day, I think it attracts more fans on both sides of things. And he's just such a good racer that you have to let him do this for just for the sake of the sport.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. My hope is that weather will not play a factor this time, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that way he could actually go forth and complete both races overall, because, well, it's been a long while since we've seen a driver actually race through and finish all the miles within both races there, would have solid results to boot. So it's not something we do see that often, but something that we got to commend while we can be able to potentially see that. Now, Larson,
I was just going to say, I like how he has to point out that he's prioritizing attending the Coca-Cola 600, though, because he's probably just like, I am not doing what I did last year again. So,
yeah, because I'm pretty sure that Hendrick Motorsports and Larson caught flack from the higher-ups at NASCAR just because he ended up prioritizing the Indianapolis 500 over the Coca-Cola 600 there. And while they definitely let it go once and gave him the waiver to still compete in the playoffs and everything, I'm sure if it happens again, they're not going to be as nice about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of egos involved for sure.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And that's putting it lightly there. Man. But still very exciting. Still exciting to see him run with Aaron McLaren again. Hopefully, Aaron McLaren could maybe get involved in NASCAR one of these days. I know Pato O'Ward, the IndyCar Series driver, he expressed interest in maybe doing a NASCAR race there. That would be pretty cool, too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the more crossover, I think the more competition you bring to the table. And that becomes more entertaining for the fans as well when you can highlight stories like this and have these types of narratives come into play. So it only helps the appeal on both sides of, or really both sports, and you bring some, fans that would watch something else to the NASCAR arena and cheer on some of these guys that they've been loyal to in a different, a slightly different sport.
I 100% agree with that, man. More crossover, please. We like seeing different drivers test themselves in all sorts of racing disciplines. That's how it should be.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, speaking of different racing disciplines, because we're moving away from Cup Series and IndyCar for this next news note, we're going to Xfinity here with Dawson Cram announcing that he's going to start 5 races with DGM Racing in the Xfinity Series, starting at Kansas in 3 weeks there, Mark. Now, we've seen Dawson Cram a couple of times throughout various races this year on many different teams. We've seen him with Joey Gase Motorsports before in the past. We've seen him with Mike Harmon Racing. Now, DGM Racing, I think this one is interesting because out of all the different teams that Dawson Cram has been a part of this year, I think this is the best equipment that he's going to be getting. And then he's going to get that for 5 races to end the year. He's going to be racing with the team at Kansas, the Charlotte Roval, Las Vegas, Martinsville, and then the season finale at Phoenix there, Mark.
Okay, so we have to remember this one because I'm willing to take a shot here on the very first race before everyone else in the industry targets him in future DFS contests. So absolutely, we have to keep an eye on Dawson Cram. If we're getting a $5,000 price point on him, that's worth taking a stab at here.
Yeah, and just to compare, he's going to be driving in similar equipment on the level that what Kyle Weatherman usually drives week in and week out.
There you go. And we just saw Weatherman have a big day. So
that right there is something to keep in mind. As we know, DGM, they're going to also, as a tease towards not too long from now, they're going to be running multiple cars this weekend at Watkins Glen. So that's something to keep in mind too.
So if you missed the Haley train, here's the next train that we're looking at on the Xfinity level. So just keep that in mind, and just make sure you target it before there's more data. I can't stress that enough. Is if you want to get different, if you want some sort of lower ownership opportunity in a spot where, yeah, there's unknown, but there's a lot more of a potential here for the same name that we normally see, around the bottom of the pack. This is the spot to target here for sure.
Yeah, especially if he ends up qualifying about as deep as he normally would. I mean, that could be very interesting to look at overall. So,
yeah,
something to keep in mind there. Now, that's all the news items that we are going to be hitting for this week's race. Let's actually get into a preview of Watkins Glen. So that is the track we are racing on this week. We got road course racing on tap. The first time all year that both series are hitting Watkins Glen, they make their only annual trip here in the playoffs for Cup, whereas Xfinity, they're at this track with 2 races to go before their playoffs are set. So we got the usual short track and road course rules package there for Cup. Now, what's interesting, Mark, is the fact that Goodyear's been testing new tire compounds for this particular track in order to maybe bring a bigger difference into what could be the pit strategy, the race strategy for this week's race, as they've been talking about how the tires are going to have much larger fall off over the course of a longer run, meaning that fresh tires could be a big difference maker in this race potentially there, Mark.
Yeah, I think tire management, guys that know how to manage tires, get a little bit of an extra bump there as far as value goes. And then, we saw it. So I think it was in June or July when we saw Daniel Suarez, Tyler Reddick, and Austin Cindric all actually get to test these tires on this track to measure the fall off. I think Reddick spun out a few times when they were testing the tires. Suarez spun out once. And I don't think Cindric had any issues. Now, Cindric, I don't know if that's necessarily a road racer that I'm going after, but for the other two, like Suarez, to me, sticks out. He's a guy that's been racing well. He can do well on this race. And he's also a guy who got the opportunity to test those tires personally, just a little bit ago. NASCAR came out and said they tried to basically improve on the tires since they tested them. So hopefully there's not as much of a fall off as, what they experienced back in early July or whenever that was. But NASCAR says a lot of things. So.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it shakes out, but it just gives more unknowns towards this race. But still, when it comes towards the DFS and betting, we still have to rely on the usual strategies we have for this type of track. Now, as we know, it's a road course, so for the purposes of DFS, we know that dominators aren't going to be holding as much power over for how many points a lineup can earn because there's just a flat out lower lap count. So what's going to matter more? A lot of place differential is going to be big here, and especially finishing position is going to really matter at this track, Mark.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, I'm going to go after top tier drivers or bottom tier drivers for this race because the qualifying means everything here. Starting position is going to have a huge impact. And like you said, place differential will certainly come into play. I think it'll even be emphasized more with this whole tire element that's being thrown at us here. So, we have to even consider guys that are in the back end of the pack to move up pretty significantly. So let's keep an eye on that. But as far as roster construction, it's pretty hard to say at this point until we truly get the qualifying results.
That is very true. This race is going to be a little bit qualifying dependent, especially at the top, knowing which drivers could potentially be the chalky plays that'll just go right through the field and get that place differential, or some of the value plays that could have the potential to move up. Or in the case of trying to be different, maybe even some drivers that can be able to maintain a high position that are just priced lower, which would be perfect for a GPP opportunity.
100%. Yeah. And what you could approach differently is maybe just going after more of the veterans who know how to manage tires better than some of these younger guys. So, the one concern I have is like a 5,000, 5,500 driver in this type of setup. That's young, that doesn't have as much of experience and maybe has experienced road racing, but not necessarily a very good track record managing their tires. So like a guy like Kyle Busch, I'm much more interested than like, I don't know, one of these younger guys. I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
You mean like a Carson Hocevar, for example?
Oh, maybe? Yeah. I mean, that's a great example, but I was even thinking like someone who's seen road race success, but like an SVG or like an Alex Bowman or something like that, where, yeah, they do have really good track record on road courses, but are they going to fall apart in the pits? So,
yeah, that's another big thing too, because pit strategy is going to be very big within this race just because it's a large track overall. And if this is green flag pit stops, you can maybe see some drivers, particularly in the last stage, which is longer than the first two, they might try in order to maybe even short pit or even just try to run long. And that could be a big factor in determining the time difference between that and other positions as it is, because this is also one of those tracks where it's big enough that if you're close enough to the lead, you can pit right there and not lose a lap. And that's big.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, strategy is going to be huge in this. So, and there's going to be a lot of contrarian approaches, I would imagine.
Oh, definitely. That is for sure. Especially when you think of the playoff drivers and some of the circumstances they have. It wouldn't shock me if some playoff drivers in particular maybe take a strategy in order to risk getting a win that way, just because then that means automatic advancement to move on. Now, there's some drivers like, say, for example, Chase Briscoe, who's definitely behind on the points, and really he needs a really good day or he needs to win in order to move on. That's one of the teams right there that I think of that could really play a crazy strategy in order to actually try and maybe steal a win or just try to see if they could finish top 5 and get a lot of points that way to make up that gap.
I think he's got pretty good road course records too, particularly at Watkins Glen. So I like that call.
He's been mixed at Watkins Glen before.
He's a decent price point too. I mean, what is he, $7,100 or seven grand, somewhere around there?
Yeah, 7,100 on DraftKings overall, which is very close towards the value tier for my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a guy that just won a race a few weeks ago. So
Indeed, indeed. So now let's get into the notables and part-timers that are starting this week for Xfinity and Cup. And man, Xfinity is quite stacked this week with talent. So Jade Buford is in the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing. We have Kyle Keller in the number 13. RC Enerson, a road course racing guy, is in the number 14 for SS Greenlight Racing. Joey Logano is driving the AM Racing number 15 this week. That's something to watch right there. But what we should really watch more is the next few drivers I'm about to list here, because William Byron is in this race. He's driving the Hendrick number 17, and we know that car is especially fast at this track. Ty Gibbs is in the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing. Another driver that we have to watch for Xfinity right there. And then Eric Almirola is back in the 20 car, and he's rattled off some great results in that car this season as well. Now, another driver that we should really keep our eye on in Xfinity, though, is Ed Jones in that Sam Hunt Racing number 26. Now, he's priced quite a bit lower than some of those other drivers I just mentioned, so he's had some pretty favorable results at road courses in the Xfinity Series to keep in mind there, as is Austin Green in the number 32 for Jordan Anderson Racing. Another one we have to keep our eye on right there. We have Thomas Annunziata in the number 35. Kyle Weatherman, instead of driving the 91, he's driving the number 36 for DGM Racing this week. Note the number change there. Alon Day is driving the number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing. There might be an entry for someone driving in the number 87 as of right now, time stamping this Wednesday. We do not know if there's going to be a number 87 car for Xfinity. Connor Zilic, this one is exciting too, because he's driving in that Junior Motorsports number 88, which has had some great results overall this year. Josh Bilicki is in the number 91 for DGM Racing. And then we have another Cup driver to round out the list for Xfinity. Ross Chastain is in the number 92 for DGM Racing there. That's very interesting to keep in mind. Now, for Cup Series, we have AJ Allmendinger in the number 13 Chevrolet for Kaulig Racing. Kaz Grala in the number 15 for Rick Ware Racing. Shane Van Gisbergen is back once again in the number 16 for Kaulig. And then Juan Pablo Montoya is back, driving for the number 50 for 2311 Racing. That is very exciting to see an old driver for that formerly used to drive in Cup come back for a one-off start at Watkins Glen.
And yeah, I mean, I think he's an interesting play because I think a lot of people look at, I mean, he's like a 48-year-old driver who obviously has previous racing history and several different elements, Formula One. I mean, the list goes on. So I think, he's here for a reason. He specializes in this type of race. We'll see how he does in qualifying. I think that has an impact on what we think happens with him. But I mean, he's $8,000, so he's priced up a bit. But the sports books agree that he's definitely got a shot at making some noise in this race. So I think he's an interesting play. SVG is, of course, interesting as well. And Kaz Grala is a road course type of guy. I mean, that's kind of what he made his name doing coming up. So he's going to be dirt cheap. He might be like a 4,700. I guess he probably is. His pricing is posted.
He is the very bottom on the DraftKings and FanDuel price ladders. He is a flat 5K on DK, a flat 2K on FanDuel right there.
So if you want to get different, I mean, I think that's definitely a guy worth taking a shot on here. So
true, he could be in play. Definitely think he would be useful too, because he doesn't normally also qualify too well in these types of tracks, but that's kind of a little more based on the equipment rather than it is the driver. But we know that Watkins Glen is a road course that really equipment matters here, but driver talent also matters here as well too. So we could see that be a factor. All right. So before we get into our picks for the week there, I'm just going to quickly go ahead and plug fantasyguru.com. Once again, if you aren't over there getting one of the subscriptions, whether that's Game Time, MVP, all in for $40, which with NBA coming up very soon, you may want to get in on that. Or you can get the MVP Platinum or all in packages for the NFL, which Mark also contributes to and does a great job with that as well. So you can go forth, get those packages, email support at fantasyguru.com for the best possible deal you can get, and go forth, start winning to get today with Fantasy Guru.
I just want to add though, so NBA, NHL, those are cash opportunities. Like if you want to build your bankroll, NBA, NHL particularly for tournaments. I took a huge step last year reading some of the NHL stuff that was going up on the site. So really excited for hockey. NBA, I mean, we got Fenty on board here. Like, we got a lot going on that front, and it's a day-to-day opportunity to cash as long as you approach it correctly. So keep up with those guys because they are going to guide you towards success.
Yeah, and especially in a few months when we get towards the college basketball coming up here. I know Ted Schuster in particular has a very big reputation for nailing a lot of betting calls with that, so you may want to get in for that too.
100%.
All right, now let's get into our picks for the week and discuss some drivers here. So top price picks to watch. Well, we basically kind of think very similarly, but there are a few differences between Mark and I this week. Now, we're on all three of the Hendrick Motorsports drivers in this tier. There is no question about that. Kyle Larson, William Byron, Chase Elliott. I think you'd have to get some action in on all three of these guys, especially when you consider that Hendrick Motorsports has been undefeated at this track in the Cup Series for like the past 5 or 6 years, Mark. Crazy to think.
Yeah, William Byron just won the race last year, and I like Byron a lot. I think he's kind of in maybe a lower owned of these three. Well, I guess Chase Elliott's probably the least owned of the three, but I think Byron is particularly interesting, especially because we're going to see him in the Xfinity race, so he's going to get some extra track time.
Yeah, I like Byron for that reason a lot too. I mean, really, you can't deny all three of these drivers just are going to probably be in contention. This is just a Hendrick track, and for a while there, I could also even think of way back in the day when Jeff Gordon used to dominate at this track with Hendrick, way back in the day. And then ever since Elliott got his first win here, Hendrick has not looked back, and they've been back to being dominant at this track again there, Mark. So something we have to really keep in mind as it is. Now, we're both on Tyler Reddick, but which is no shock because Reddick is great at the road courses this year. And then the last driver that we have on each of our list is different. Now, we're both on drivers from the same team this week, but two different drivers. I'm on Allmendinger. I got the dinger for me. You're on SVG.
I think both are in play. I mean, I like Allmendinger just as much as SVG. SVG has just been really good at these courses, and he's taken them home too. So SVG and Allmendinger, it's like splitting hairs in my opinion. Allmendinger, I could make the argument for is the better play just because SVG maybe is a little bit riskier when it comes to operating in the pits, something going wrong with the car. Like I think there's a little bit higher probability that could happen to him than Allmendinger. But both are excellent road course drivers. And the one thing I'll say about Reddick, he qualifies very well in road courses, like very well. And so the concern is that, if he qualifies towards the top, I mean, he's going to have to record a ton of laps led, fastest laps to pay off because place differential is going to be huge in this race.
Oh, that is for sure. And as we noted earlier, there's not as many laps in order to go around in order to lead laps. So dominators cannot earn as much points as most other weeks. And that also applies to fastest laps as well. So
I feel like he's got to start on the pole or like one or two to give us a shot at him paying off.
So looking back at Tyler Reddick's history with qualifying on this particular track now, he's made 3 starts here. 2021, while driving for RCR, he started 13th, finished 10th. 2022, when he started also for RCR, he started 5th, he finished 7th. Now, last year, his first year with 2311 racing at Watkins Glen, he started in the 8th position. He also finished 8th. So, for perspective there, he's got 3 top 10 finishes in 3 starts. Very good ultimately overall, but not a lot of place differential there to gain.
Doesn't pay off for DFS in any of those instances, I would say, given what his price points were. So, yeah, he's got to be all the way up at the top for me to roster him, in my opinion.
I think what's very interesting about Reddick is how he's been priced on both of the sites this week. On FanDuel, he's the most expensive driver at $14K. But the difference between that and his DraftKings price is actually something we really have to note this week, because he's not even in that 10K range with those Hendrick guys that he eclipses on FanDuel. He's 9,500. That's 5th most expensive on the board there, behind the 3 Hendrick drivers we talked about and behind SVG as well.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He saves you a bit, but even at 9,500 is still expensive for a guy. Like if he starts in 8th and finishes 8th at 9,500, that doesn't do us anything. So maybe in like a very small cash game type of setting where you're playing against like 4 people or less, but other than that, we need him 1 or 2 to start, 1 or 2, and to hold that position for quite some time.
It's possible, but he also could carry some very low ownership as well as a result with that.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So something to keep in mind maybe for a GPP there with Reddick. Now, I did also want to mention that AJ Allmendinger, if you were going to pick a week in order to use him, this is the week in order to use him, because this is probably his best track statistically overall in the Cup Series. Even within the last two years where he's been driving for Qualic Racing, top 5 finishes both years. And this is also the track where Allmendinger got his first career Cup win. And we always know drivers that end up driving at tracks where they get their first Cup win, they tend to do much better than the average track. It's bar none. There's just something to it.
Yeah, it's a special place in his heart, and then there's the whole psychological element to it, but also, there's a reason why they're winning and they continue to win here, because they have a really good feel for the track and they get in a groove and it fits their style of racing. So, Allmendinger certainly in play. It's going to be hard not to roster him.
Yeah, he's cheaper than SVG, as mentioned there. Flat 9,000 versus 9,800. I do think both drivers are in play, especially if the qualifying results do indicate that they'll be good. But I just like Allmendinger more.
I agree. You save $800. That gives you some flexibility towards the bottom to build out the rest of your lineup. SVG I think is going to be popular too. So he's right at the top of the sports books as far as a favorite goes. So, but qualifying can change everything.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to keep in mind for SVG, how he does in qualifying in particular.
Yep.
So let's get into our mid-tier picks and drivers to watch. Now, we are on 2 of the same drivers here this week, Daniel Suarez and Ryan Blaney. Now, Suarez, that's no surprise considering his history at the track. He's had multiple top 5 finishes at Watkins Glen in the past. The price point is very good. He's under that 8K range on DraftKings, and for FanDuel, he's a flat 8,000, so very good pricing over there. And Ryan Blaney, he's a driver that I think could really surprise this week there too. He's actually, here's an interesting stat here, Mark. Within the last 5 road course events, you know what Ryan Blaney's worst finish is, Mark?
24th.
Nope, it's 12th.
No? Okay, wow. That's even better than I thought.
Yeah. And this even includes the Watkins Glen race last year as well, where he finished 9th.
I mean, I feel like he, and the pricing backs up the narrative in the industry that people are going to overlook him and maybe can think of Ryan Blaney as a road course racer. And so, he just flies under the radar, but he's priced very low, a driver that's driving well. He literally just drove a cardboard box held together by tape around a track last week. And he's got some nice track history here at Watkins Glen. So lots of place differential moments. I think he is an excellent play this week across the board.
Yeah. Very sneaky good play, I'm saying right there, too. He also has 3 top 10 finishes in 7 starts. This includes the 9th place finish, as mentioned, but he also has scored positive place differential on 5 different occasions at this track. So that right there says a lot about how good he can be. And just to correct myself there, it wasn't 12th being his worst finish. It was actually 13th, but still quite good.
100%. That's impressive for someone that we don't think of off the top of our head when it comes to this type of race.
Yes, that is for certain. Now, where we get different is with our last drivers here. Now, you have Juan Pablo Montoya there, which I think is a very interesting call, and I'm not against that either. But I have Chris Buescher on my list overall there, Mark. What do you think about Chris Buescher this week?
For me, I don't know. My issue with Buescher is I just feel like he has had some problems crop up, particularly whether it's, between other drivers or in the pits. Like, I just feel like it has been a very challenging season for Buescher. And with this whole new tire compound that we're introducing here, I feel like he could be one of those guys, in my opinion, that suffers from that element. So that is why I'm feeling a little weird about him. I'm not that excited. And I also think he's going to command some decent ownership as well.
I wouldn't be shocked if he did have some decent rostership anyway, just based on the fact of how well he does at road courses in general. Now, here's a very interesting stat for you. Since the next-gen car, Chris Buescher, he's finished 11th or better in every single road course race except the first race at COTA, where he finished 21st. All their times 11th or better.
COTA's a comparable track, though, too. A very comparable track to, I would say, the most comparable track or race to this one, right?
In some ways, yeah. Sonoma has a little bit of a comparability to it too. Those are the two, Sonoma and Watkins Glen, they're the 2 road courses that have been on the schedule the longest. So a lot of these veteran drivers have more experience on those 2 tracks in particular compared to the other ones. But even when you mentioned the first COTA race there with Buescher, that 21st place finish, well, the next 2 years after that, 8th in 2023, and then earlier this year he finished 8th again.
Yeah. This is a qualifying dependent play in my opinion. So him and Juan Pablo Montoya, I just think we have to look at qualifying to, I have a larger pool right now than I will Saturday night, right? So I think it all just depends on what we see in the results for that. But I think all of these guys are absolutely in play.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. A few other drivers that I'll mention there too to maybe keep an eye on. Denny Hamlin at 8,100. This, out of all the road courses, this is his best one. So I do think we should really keep an eye on him there. Austin Cindric, 7,700 on DraftKings. Cindric is at his best with the super speedways and the road courses. He could be one to watch here, and he did do the test as well. Ross Chastain could be an interesting to watch if he qualifies really far deep, but really another sneaky play that I really, really like, Mark, and I didn't mention this in my list there too, but how about Joey Logano? 7,300 there.
Yeah, very cheap, but I feel like I haven't looked at Logano's history, but he just seems like a guy that always has like problems come up where he spins out early on and then gets behind and then can't catch up. But he has shown some good results recently. So for these road courses, I should say. He just won, though. That's the other thing. So I feel like, do you think he's going to go more for stage points and not get too aggressive, especially if he doesn't qualify towards the top?
Well, if he qualifies towards the top, he's going to try to go for the stage wins more than anything, I feel, or he's going to try to go for the win to get those 5 extra points, which those will carry into the next few playoff rounds, which is also big in his case because he needs the playoff points.
Yeah.
So he's got something in order to race for. But why I also like Logano too happens to deal with that he's a former winner at this track, and also he's been top 10 at this track in the next gen card the last 2 races, 3rd in 2022 and 10th last year.
I mean, I didn't even realize his results were that good, so that definitely sells me on him a little bit more. I just feel like I'm chasing, though, going after the guy that just won the previous race on a different type of track. So that's the only concern I have is I'm trying to just stay away from ownership, and I feel like he's going to command some naturally more ownership because of recency bias.
It's possible, but I do think that he's very much going to be in play. You can mention any of the 3 Penske guys because they're all priced similarly. They're all going to be in play this week, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? My thought process from a strategic standpoint, because I know it's really hard for us to just tell you what kind of roster construction we should look at without qualifying, but the Chevys look very interesting in general. I think that might almost be a good blueprint to put in place. I think I'm going to probably have 4 in my DK lineup, 4 Chevy drivers, and then build the rest out with maybe a couple Toyotas or something like that. So I'm a little off the Fords here for this week.
Interesting way to look at it, but qualifying could very easily swing this because Ford does have some good talent at the road courses as well too. I mean, all the manufacturers do, realistically speaking, but yeah, we keep mentioning that this is a very qualifying dependent race. It's just huge here. It really is because it's also not easy in order to make up positions over time at this track too. There's only just a couple of turns where there's some recommended passing zones, and then if you don't hit those, it becomes that much trickier just to advance.
It'll be interesting. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up this sports books right now to look at how they feel about some of the manufacturers.
Okay, so I have this
Here
here
it
from
is.
DK Sportsbook, the winning manufacturer bet. Chevrolet is at minus 145, Toyota's at plus 220, and then Ford's at plus 400.
Yeah, and then if we look at like the drivers within those, what's interesting is there's a lot more Fords, of course, in this race than the Toyotas, but the Toyotas and the Chevys just have a lot. I mean, you have SVG, you have Kyle Larson, you have William Byron, Allmendinger, the list goes on. Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, Suarez. I mean, these are all Chevys. Alex Bowman, who's had some success, obviously. And I just feel like a guy like McDowell, I feel like I don't want to fall for McDowell this week. He seems like fool's gold to me.
If I'm going to be betting on a Ford driver to be top Ford, I'm right now maybe looking at Buescher or one of the Penske guys to do it.
Like Blaney. Yeah, I like Blaney a lot this week. I think especially with Logano just winning, I like Blaney a lot.
Yeah, truly. I think Blaney might be at the play.
That's a great bet. Blaney plus 650 just to be the top Ford. And then if he qualifies well, he could start towards the front of all of them as anyways. So that's not a terrible bet to place tonight.
Yeah, that is for sure. Let's get into some of our potential sleepers and value plays here for this week, Mark. So regarding the sleepers and bargains, this is very interesting. We have just one driver in common, that being Ricky Stenhouse Jr. That number 47 driver, he's consistently been a top 20 finisher the last couple of years at Watkins Glen, and that even includes the next-gen car as well. So he's a driver that I definitely like for the price point. He's easy to slot right on in. And where we get different is you have Kaz Gralla and Brad Keselowski. I have Bubba Wallace and Ryan Preece overall there, Mark.
Yeah, I wanted to get different here. I think my initial approach is going after more of the mid tier and not punting as much. But if I'm going to punt, I'm going to punt all the way down to a guy like Kaz Gralla with road course history. So that's my thought process with Gralla here. Definitely have concern with him. So it's a GPP play only. Ricky Stenhouse, I mean, like you said, has got some nice place differential history here. He's a veteran driver who probably has a better understanding of how he needs to manage his tires with this new tire compound. So that's kind of where I'm at with those two. And then, well, actually, I think I covered all three because Brad K. I mean, he's another veteran guy. So you'll see a consistent theme with some of the drivers that I'm going after. But generally speaking, I'm going after the vets. I'll throw in a guy like Gralla, but I want to go after these older drivers with more experience, more understanding of how they can potentially manage their tires in a new situation. So that's kind of why that's where I stand with Brad K and Stenhouse, and then Gralla. I think is just your nice punt play that you can get different with by going to the bare minimum.
If you were to ask me a couple years ago if I would be on Bubba Wallace in order to do well at a road course, I would absolutely tell you no way, no how, not a chance. But this year, though, has been very interesting when it comes to Bubba on the road courses because clearly he's actually improving his results on the road courses, and that's something that I don't think people are really taking enough notice on, Mark, just because you look back towards the last 6 road course events, top 20 every single time. And that includes both of the road course races this year, even though he lost place differential in both. And you could even throw Chicago in there too. He's still been top 20, which considering he's in 2311 racing equipment, and that's one of the top teams in the field, and he's in that value tier, I think that's something that you really have to keep an eye on, especially if he ends up qualifying mid-pack. I think he could be a sneaky play overall there, Mark.
Yeah, I think you're right. $6,600 is pretty inexpensive for Bubba Wallace. Like you said, the history is there. The only race that was kind of a dud at Watkins Glen as of recent, and this next gen car was because of a suspension issue. So he finished 12th in the most recent, and then back in 2021, he went from 26th to 23rd. But I mean, like you said, this could be a guy that we see start like 21st and then make his way up to like 11th or 12th, and at $6,600, it's going to pay off.
Oh yeah, he'll be worth it at that price point. And then while you have Kaz Gralla as your punt play, I have Ryan Preece really as the punt play that I trust the most there. When you get towards like that below 6K range, you get a lot of drivers that don't have a lot of experience on this particular road course, or just not a lot of experience in the cup cars yet. Ryan Preece, I think, has the most experience out of all of these drivers that are below 6K. And as a result, he also has some pretty nice history at this track as well there, Marks. And even dating back towards last year, I remember 2023, he started this race from the 30th position. He made it all the way up to 18th. And then you think about the price point he's at, 5,400 on DraftKings and 3,800 on FanDuel. That'll pay off for you.
I love this play. I think this is sneaky. This goes into the strategy I was just talking about too. So I'm almost kind of feeling this one a bit more than Gralla if I had to prioritize.
And not to mention the thing that makes, if you were going to tell me to pick between Gralla and Ryan Preece, I'm going to go Ryan Preece hands down just because the equipment is just that much better too.
And that's a big factor, 100%. So I agree. I think Preece is he's going to be certainly in the crosshairs for me as well.
Yeah. Although I am going to also say this too. If you do want a sneaky play that's under 6K that I also like, that I don't think a lot of people are really going to be on, Zane Smith at 5,700. He's been top 20 in the last 2 road course events. And he also finished solidly in the Chicago Street Course as well, too. So something to keep in mind, even though he does not have any experience in a cup car at this track. That could also lead to him being not highly rostered, and that could be very sneaky.
I love it. That's the edge that we're looking for, is where are the guys that present unknown that everyone else in the industry is going to look elsewhere because they don't know either way. And so if we can look beyond that and extrapolate on what information we do have on a driver like that, that's where we get the 1% opportunities. And that's what it's all about. That's how you get leverage on the entire field and you knock down an entire tournament.
Pretty much. If you're going to go below 6K, Zane Smith and Ryan Preece, those are the two drivers that I'd want to get.
Love it. I love it.
Let's get into our core fours overall here. So I'll go first with my betting core four. I have Kyle Larson at plus 600, William Byron at plus 650, Tyler Reddick at plus 900, and then AJ Allmendinger at plus 1,000. Now, my two long shot outrights to win, Daniel Suarez at plus 2,500, and then Ryan Blaney at plus 4,500 there, Mark. Let's hear yours here.
Yeah, I overlap with you on William Byron and Tyler Reddick. Byron at plus 650, Reddick at plus 900. So the thought process, especially with Reddick, is, hey, he might not be a guy I end up rostering in DFS, but certainly a guy that I want to target for a winner. Daniel Suarez, we've got a lot of points. We made a lot of points on him, plus 2,500. I guess we overlap on that one too. But then SVG for me is the difference. Another guy that, maybe is priced up too high in DFS, but this is a good opportunity to get some exposure to him so that I'm covering my bases. I'm hedging my DFS lineups quite a bit, but also going after a guy that certainly could knock down a race like this.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I like it. Let's get into our DFS core fours here. My DFS core four, I have AJ Allmendinger at 9,000 on DraftKings and 10,500 on FanDuel. Daniel Suarez at 7,900 on DraftKings and 8,000 on FanDuel. And then Bubba Wallace at 6,600 on DraftKings and 6,000 on FanDuel. And now I also have as my top driver, I have Kyle Larson listed at 10,500 and 13,500 on FanDuel. So while I like Larson probably the most just because he's been the best there in more recent years out of the 300 drivers, I do think you can easily interchange this with William Byron or Chase Elliott if you wanted to, and I'd be fine with that too.
Yep. So Bubba Wallace, I absolutely, you're really warming me up to that play here. And Kyle Larson is definitely due for a bounce back week, and this is a track he can do it on. So I'm good with those. For me, I got Ryan Blaney, $7,400 on DraftKings. FanDuel, $7,200. Daniel Suarez, $7,900 on DK. FanDuel, $8,000. William Byron, DK, $10,300. FanDuel, $13K. And then Kyle Busch is my difference here. DK, $8,800. FanDuel, $9,000. I like Kyle Busch. I know we haven't talked about him a lot, but I think he's driving a lot better these days. We also have a guy that knows how to manage his tires, quite the veteran, and has plenty of an extensive history on this course here. So I think he is $8,800. A lot of people just look at him as kind of the black cat of the group here, and we see decent ownership. Or lower ownership opportunities often with Busch. So I like going after Kyle Busch here. I think he's an interesting price point and a little contrarian this week.
I like it. I like it a lot, actually, especially with Busch being hot regardless of the track type in the last couple of weeks. Pretty much ever since the Cup Series returned from the Olympic break, he's just been top 10ing the whole field to death right here. So I love the call there for Kyle Busch, and especially his price on FanDuel being below the salary cap average. I especially love that this week. Good call.
Absolutely.
There, Mark.
Of course.
All right, so we're done with the Thunder Hour this week. We got Watkins Glen here. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you all for watching and listening to the Race Guru Thunder Hour here. That was Mark Hogan, DFS Marlin. Any closing remarks here?
No, I think, we hit the theme of we have to look at what happens this weekend. So keep up in the Discord. I'm really going to hone in on ownership opportunities leading into this weekend. So if you want to keep up with me on that, I'll try to share my findings in the Discord as well. All the more reason to keep up with us on a premium level over there. Otherwise, good luck this weekend. Looking forward to getting after it and bringing home some money. And parlaying that into maybe some Sunday night and Monday night football.
Sounds like a great plan, man. I love it. Mark is going to be handling the Xfinity stuff this week, and I'm going to be on it for Cup. Do be sure to look out for our content throughout the week. Be sure to hit us up at Discord, hit us up on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it there. And we will be seeing you next time on the Race Guru Thunder Hour.